Well, hey everyone. Welcome to Everyday Woodworking, a podcast for smart discussions about the craft, business, and love of woodworking, both as a hobby and as a profession. I'm your host, Ricky Fitzpatrick. I'm a woodworker and the owner of Apple Valley Farm, where we make handmade crafts and decor. I've been woodworking most of my life, and now with Everyday Woodworking, I have the opportunity to share my experiences, my thoughts, and even my challenges with you. And I can't wait for you to join me right here for the next episode of Everyday Woodworking. Today, we are talking about something that may be more near and dear to my heart than you might know. Keep in mind, we're in the South, and especially right now, it's hot. And no, if you're like from Michigan, you have no idea what I'm talking about. Hot in the South is a different hot, okay? Different from anywhere else in the country. A Southern hot is not only temperature related, but it's humidity based. And so like when you mix 100 degrees with like 85% humidity, you can hardly breathe, Jack. I mean, it is hot. It is just hot. So anyway, we reached out to our woodworking friends on social media, and actually I was surprised at some of the comments I got. You might be too. And if you're like me, you might find yourself saying when I go over this, hey, that sounds a lot like me as we're talking about this upcoming subject. And when we're done, you'll have a whole bunch of new info and tons of options for heating and cooling your small shop. Okay, you know, cooling and heating your shop, that's a big bite. I know that's a biggie. Okay, you could dump a big chunk of money into this, so we really want to do some exploring. Okay, anyway, so let's get going. Man, we've got a lot of ground to cover here. We got a long way to go and a short time to get there. So to begin with, I wanted to share the results of our social media research. Before today, we asked everyone out there in social media land, what are your thoughts on AC and heat in the shop? And the response was like gigantic. We got a whole array of comments back, so many that actually I just dumped everything into a spreadsheet so I could keep it a little better organized and see how it all breaks down. And so that's partly what I want to share with you here. I think this is going to be pretty interesting. I really think it is. Several folks really shared some great info with us, and some of it I could really relate to. Let me just give you a few excerpts of what I got. Chris Riley from Facebook said, I don't have AC and I live in the South. Oh my Lord. It's just plain miserable. I'm trying to convince my wife, and he has capitalized the word wife very smartly. I'm trying to convince my wife that I need a dedicated shop rather than our 2-car garage. Amen, brother. Pretty much I'm covered in sweat and drenched shirts every time. Chris, I know exactly what you mean. I feel your pain, brother. In the dog days, I go through like 3 or 4 shirts a day. Every day. It is tough being in the South and working outside. Baxter Hammock, another Facebook friend, said, I've got a 1,500-foot shop. I only have an attic fan with 2 other fans in each room for summer. In winter, I use my wood stove. That's very smart. With fans, with fans mounted on the stovepipe to distribute the heated air. That sounds pretty smart to me. Especially the fan up on the stovepipe. That's good. That's like redneck ingenuity, right? So, I don't know. And I don't know. Maybe you can like go to Amazon and buy that get up. I really don't know. But I thought, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Finally, David Boardman. David's a friend of mine that I turn to on social media for help a lot, and he's local. He's a great woodworker, and he said, I can handle the heat much better than I can cold, so I can glue. And that makes sense too. So I have one of those hanging from the ceiling electric heaters and an insulated garage door. That is great. The forced air heater, that really piques my curiosity, and I will get into that as we go on. I like it, but I don't know if I can afford it. But I love the idea. But I figured, David, if you're doing it, then that's got to be a smart idea. Anyway, so before we get into some of the options, let me break down these stats from our survey really quickly. We got some pretty cool stuff here. A little over 30% of our listeners who responded to the survey have a dedicated shop. Now that's a freestanding place, not connected to the house like a garage. 25% of them work out of a carport or garage. Hello, that's my people. Half have no AC or heat at all. That blows my mind. But now all those people aren't in the South. But 6%, just 6%, have a central heating and air set up. That's not all that unexpected. That's a very small number, but that's a big investment right there. About 12% use either window AC units or the little mini split units. That's very cool. No pun intended. And about 43% use fans of some sort, and that's me. I'm all fans in the summertime here. As for heat, again, 6% have HVAC. 25% use electric heaters. Again, that's me in the winter. Pretty worthless though, but I still do it. About 12% use either propane or kerosene heat, and 6% use a wood stove. Actually, I've got a small wood stove that a friend gave me several years ago. Thank you, Greg Mathis, by the way. I'm saving it for when I have a dedicated shop, if that ever happens. But for now, it just sits there like mocking me, just looking at me. It's a really cool, anyway, I won't get into it. It's a really cool little stove though. Anyway, that is, I think that's a lot of very cool info. But overall, what it tells me is, even though we're all, or most of us, we're all woodworkers to some degree, we're all facilitating the process for heating and cooling in our own individual ways. I'm encouraged, though, to learn that most of us are still pretty small scale in what we do, because I am. That was kind of unexpected to me, because I guess I wound up working with so many people and so many friends who have these big shops, these really nice spaces with expensive equipment, and it just feels like I'm like the last guy left, who's still grinding it out old school. So that fact was very impressive to me. But you may be wondering, after hearing all this, what can I do, or what would work for me? Well, I'm sort of wondering those same things myself. So let's just do a high pass over some of the options for a small shop. All right, let's start with cooling. The fan. Obviously, a fan would be the first line of defense against the heat for most of us. I happen to have a box fan in my shop, and that's like entry-level solution for fans. It works okay, but once you hit about 90 degrees, it really doesn't do much more than just blow hot air around. But for less than $10, I mean, it really is hard to beat. It does a pretty good job. Beyond that, You could get one of those floor model shop fans like at Home Depot. You know, they have like 100 of them out there, all different sizes. You know, they're like one of the great big cylinder. It's like 20, 30 inches across or more. They're at Home Depot, Lowe's, stuff like that. Maybe a couple of hundred for $200 or $300. You can get a fan that'll like blow the toupee off your head. Just keep in mind that while these fans will do a better job at removing the warm air, they're going to blow your stuff around if you don't keep it secure. You can also opt for one of those stand-mounted commercial fans. A good one probably run you an easy $200, but that will work really well. Not blowing like gale force winds, but it does get it done. And it's better than the box fan. And being elevated up on a stand 3, 4, 5 feet in the air, that really will help its efficiency. All right, that's it for fans. Now on to window AC. The window AC unit does a good job. It's obviously an actual air conditioning unit, so it's not only moving air, but it's pumping cool air into your space. So, and really for a couple $100, you can get a pretty decent one. Of course, you'll need a window to mount it into, plus an outlet that I would suggest that it's preferably on its own circuit. You'll also need to consider the condensation runoff. You don't want to puddle water in your shop, and if it's going to be right outside your shop, you need to make sure you're dealing with it. And of course, if your window is on the front of your shop, then all the neighbors are going to see it and talk, and it's kind of not going to be very pretty sitting out there. Next would be mini split units. Now, this is something I don't really know. I don't have a lot of first-hand knowledge, let me say that. But in my opinion, the mini split units are probably a great solution for a small shop as far as these little units go. But I think you're going to probably have to be prepared to shell out at least a couple of grand or more, plus the installation. And again, this is just based on some of my research. But before I get into the details of whether they're good or not, you're probably thinking, if you were like me, what is a mini split unit? Because I didn't know. Anyway, if you don't know, a mini split is a ductless, localized air conditioning system. Now, when I say air conditioning, that may mean cool air, but it also would be heat. So it is like your central heating and air system, but it doesn't have ductwork. Each room or each area would have its own little unit that's pumping conditioned air into the space. It's kind of like a window AC unit, but you don't need the window, among other things. It is a little more complex than that, though. If you get the mini split, you're going to have an outdoor component, then individual indoor units for, as I said, for each space, and then the units inside provide localized cooling, but with virtually no noise and very little disruption to the room. You can turn each one on and off depending on where you want to have cooling going on. But for a big open shop, chances are you probably wouldn't do that. But you could probably make use of like several evenly spaced units. I'm not really sure. I'm just hypothesizing there. They are cool, and no pun intended, but as I said, they're not cheap. Okay. The next step up would be HVAC. So after these mini splits, you could have a full-blown HVAC system going. I'm not really going to get into it a lot. We're all familiar with what that is. I think that's probably beyond the scope of most small shops, and judging from our research and from our survey, it seems like 94% of us don't have that. So I'm not going to get all into that a lot, but obviously it's an option, and it's an expensive option, but it is probably, I was going to say it may be the most efficient option, but then again, I'm not really sure about that. But it would definitely get the job done. But you would just have to open up your pocketbook for it and have some planning going on with your space. Okay, that's all for cooling. Into heating. Let's just go ahead and say again, since we mentioned it just a second ago, a full-blown HVAC system employs a heat pump, and that would keep you comfy in the winter. Not to get into the operation of the heat pump, but a full-blown HVAC system is going to have cooling and heating properties. But as I said, I don't think many of us, if any of us, are going to be able to pursue that route. So I'm just going to bring it up only to close the door on it. We're just going to mention it to shut it down. We're aware of it, okay? But I'm going to move on to things that are maybe a little more small shop oriented. Okay, so now bringing it way back down, electric heaters. If you walk down the heater aisle at Walmart in the month of January, you're going to find out real quick how many options there are for space heaters. I mean, a lot. Most of us, myself included, make use of some sort of small electric thing that probably blows some air over heated coils, and it provides some little localized warmth. Frankly, they're really good for hands and feet, or if you can get close, if you can close in your carport or your shop area, then it eventually might kind of raise the average temperature in the space and take the edge off the cold, provided your space isn't like really big and drafty. For me, my carport shop is open to the weather, so it's like spitting in the wind, frankly, when it gets really ugly outside, especially if it's windy to boot. One of the dangers of these little heaters is their voracious appetite for power. Not only will they spike your power bill, but they can easily kick a circuit breaker, especially if you're running one on the same power strip as like your table saw or your planer. So just be aware of that. Be careful. They use a lot of power, and they don't play well with other things. So just be aware of that. Kerosene heaters. I don't have a lot of experience with kerosene heaters, but I'll tell you what I do know. First off, they're not that expensive, maybe $150, $200 at Home Depot, plus the fuel for it, for something decent. Obviously, kerosene is the fuel source for heat, and that is going to have a certain smell to it. Some people don't care. Some people don't care for it. I'm not a fan of it myself. They can be unsafe for indoor use, and so can propane heaters. Although there are indoor models, I'm still not a fan of it. That's just me. I've seen way too many scorched hardwood floors where the heater got to be more than the floor could stand, and that makes me nervous. So anyway, that's just me, but it is an option, and as our survey showed, a fair number of people use them. So, and then that would bring us naturally to propane heaters. Propane or LP, liquid propane heaters, fall into much the same category, but the ones I've seen seem to be more intense in the way they put out heat now. And I'm thinking about these propane heaters that look like a jet engine. They definitely heat the space, but just be careful. Stay mindful of whatever you have in front of it, like your leg, or something flammable. because I believe it could easily get away from you. LP is, as I said, is the fuel. And to me, that is a much safer option. Not that LP isn't explosive, but it's typically contained, in its compressed form in a tank, which is much safer than a liquid kerosene. And again, for around $200, you can get up and running. All right, now on to forced air units, and this would encompass gas or electric. Only one of our survey people mentioned using a forced air system. Frankly, I've never seen one in a home shop, but they do a great job in a commercial space, and they can be really big. Typically the forced air unit hangs from the ceiling, and it uses, as I said, either electricity or some form of gas, whether it's kerosene, propane, or natural gas as the fuel. If this is your plan, then judging from my research, I would say, depending on your fuel source, you might want to plan to drop a few $1,000s into the unit and installation and preparation for it. The electric is probably going to be less, but then your power bill is probably going to get you on the backside. Still, it's an option. This is an option I'm very curious about, so I may dig into this a little more, and I may even dedicate an entire episode to investigating it, and we'll just have to see how that unfolds. But I am very curious about these hanging forced air units. I think that might be the best option for us, especially for heating. Okay. And then, as I mentioned, the mini splits, here we are back around, at these things. But even though it's a ductless HVAC system, you've got the option for heating as well as cooling. It's very impressive. It's very clean. It's modern, but it is costly. And so, again, I'm judging just on my research, not on personal experience with them. But I would say great option, very efficient, a little on the costly side, probably. Next, the wood stove. Wood stove in the shop, that is old school. That is really old school. Put a big old stove in the shop, start setting stuff on fire, easy, you're warm. That's how it goes. And it's really not all that expensive. I mean, for $200 or $300, you can grab a small, inexpensive stove. You could probably get one used, and probably install it yourself. But there are some things to still consider. Obviously, you're going to want plenty of wood. And that may sound kind of dumb because we're woodworkers. And so if you would think, if you have one in your shop, then wood's not a problem. I'm just going to say, but when you burn your scrap wood, and it's not that you can't burn your scrap, there's not a problem with burning your scrap, but that's especially for a lot of us, it's going to be pine, poplar, stuff like that. It's going to be soft woods that are going to burn hot and fast, and they're going to give off a lot of creosote, and it's going to build up in your pipes, and that could be a problem. So, if you're using a lot of hardwood in your shop, it's probably not a concern, because that's what you want to burn in a fireplace or wood stove. Is you want to burn hardwood because you want something that burns hot and long. But you put pine in there, it's like a shooting star. It burns hot and it burns quick, and then it's done, and it leaves behind a lot of residue. So that's just remember that you do need probably to plan for some wood to be around. You also need to remember that stove is going to get hot, Jack. And if you're not familiar with how to run a wood stove, it could get really hot, dangerously hot. So keep an eye on like kids, pets, stuff like that, and yourself. And in the summer, you're not using it, so that big old thing is just sitting there in the way. So make sure you've got the room to dedicate to it year round. Otherwise, you're going to have to go through a big ordeal with disconnecting it and moving it out of the way. And I don't think any of us want to really get into that. And that just kind of covers the gamut for us on small shop cooling and heating. I think, yeah. And I know we covered a lot of ground today, and there are many other options like, like pellet stoves or radiant floor heating or solar air conditioning systems, things like that. It might be a good subject for like a wish list or something like that. But there are a lot of other options out there. Some of them are a little unusual. Some of them are just too costly. But there are other options out there. I'm just kind of hitting on some really common stuff that I could find some information on in my research. When I was growing up, I'll tell you this, we had our bandsaw and our radial arm saw and all out on our carport, and it was an open carport. And the back of our brick fireplace came out into and up through right where I work. So in the winter, when we had a fire going inside, the heat radiating from the chimney kept me warm while I worked. It was great. So that brick would radiate heat all evening long. So it was that was a good indirect heat right there. Still, anyway, lots of stuff that you could do, but I hope you learned something from this today. You may be doing some of these things, and maybe hearing some of this makes you feel like you're one step closer to deciding the best way to cool or heat your own shop or space. If you got any questions for me or comments on what we talked about today, then definitely send them to me. One of the best places to share your thoughts or questions is on our brand new Facebook group. Just search for Everyday Woodworking in the Facebook app and join us right there. A last couple of things before we go. Wherever you enjoyed this episode, please take a second and leave us a great review and spread the word to your friends about us. And of course, we would love it if you subscribed to us and became a regular listener. Also, we try to post a video of each podcast episode on our Apple Valley Farm, that woodworking channel on YouTube. That's our woodworking business. And so if YouTube is your thing, then definitely look us up and like, comment, and subscribe to us there as well. Finally, your support helps make it possible for Everyday Woodworking to continue to be on the air. So we'd love it if you blessed us with your financial support through our friends at Patreon. That's Patreon. Monthly support starts at just $5. $5. Thank you so much for your help. You can find us over at patreon.com/everydaywoodworking for all the details. And that's it for now, guys. Again, thank you so much for being here. We hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time right here on Everyday Woodworking.